everybody. Welcome to another week of FEBE, and just want to thank our sponsor, Dunkin' Donuts, from across the street. And we have actually a very good topic today regarding buy-sell agreements. I get this all the time when I'm working with clients, and Bonnie and Kathy are going to go ahead and enlighten us this morning, right?
We're going to try.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
A little taller than me. So good morning, everyone. Most of you know me. I'm Bonnie Watson, and I work with Western and Southern Life. And my partner in crime today is Kathy Perales. I'm going to let Kathy get things started for us today.
Yeah, I'm Kathy Perales. I'm a lawyer, have an office in Oberlin. And Bonnie and I wanted to put together this talk for all of you because we feel like it's just such an important topic, and we're not sure if everybody knows just how useful a buy-sell agreement can be for almost any business. It's a way to minimize the heartache and maximize the ease of transition, a necessary transition when something happens like death, divorce, retirement, something like that. So during different phases of your life and your business, you're going to want different things. For a lot of the time, you and your business partner, if you have one, are going to want to keep control and ownership in your own hands. During most of the time, you're not going to want others to be able to take control of your business, such as creditors, maybe an ex-spouse, maybe heirs. You're going to want a mechanism to be able to keep them from becoming involved in your business, even if they may be legally entitled to come in. At some point, you'll probably be ready to let your children or others take an interest in your business and become involved, and at some point, you'll be ready to exit your business, and you're going to want to be able to be compensated and retire in comfort. So today we're going to go over high points of what a buy-sell agreement is, and our aim is hopefully to educate you enough to inspire you to look into this for yourselves. So you'll, after this, think seriously about it, go talk to your attorney, see how a buy-sell agreement can help you in your business. So today we're going to discuss how to keep ownership and control of your business in your own hands when you still want it and out of the hands of others, and how to transition ownership and control when the time comes. We'll talk about why succession planning is needed to be ready for retirement or an event such as death, divorce, disability, or personal bankruptcy, both from the perspective of the remaining owners, so a surviving owner, the owner who didn't get divorced, the owner who didn't go bankrupt, and also from the perspective of these outsiders who now have an interest in your business, and they either may want to become involved in your business or they may want to be paid off for the interest that they now have in your business. We'll talk about what a buy-sell agreement is and how it works. We'll talk about what can be sometimes a difficult process of establishing the fair market value for your business, how much you'd have to pay someone, and since a buy-sell agreement is worth only the paper it's written on, if it's not funded, we'll talk about how it can be funded, how there'll be enough cash for a buyout if there needs to be one. And then we'll also look at least one case study, a real-life case study of how a buy-sell agreement could help. So Ed?
Here I am. So as a business owner, there are many common concerns, and a couple questions that we look at. As Kathy mentioned, how do I assure my business will continue to be successful after I exit the business? How do I guarantee my family will receive the full value of my business if something happens to me? And how do I prevent creditors or ex-spouses or unwanted owners from taking control of my business before I'm ready to exit the business? Well, I'd like to say it was easy, but unfortunately there's not many things in life that are guaranteed. We try to plan for the unexpected, which can include, as we've already mentioned, death, disability, divorce, even personal bankruptcy, usually come unexpectedly. But really the only thing, as the joke goes, that we can plan for is death and taxes. So in reality, if you continue to own your business, at some point you're going to retire, you are going to become disabled, or you're going to die. So we wanted to start off with a case study. So this is a real life situation. It was Jake and Emmett owned a body shop, and they'd been partners in the business for 12 years. At this point, they had met with their accountant, who had advised them to look into incorporating their business, and also the accountant advised them to look into some retirement planning. They only have one employee, a young woman who keeps the books for them. And at this point, all the profits were being put back into the business to buy equipment. They ended up meeting with a financial planner. The financial planner explained to them how retirement plans could work, and the financial planner said, hey, you guys should really consider a buy-sell agreement, which they both liked the idea of having complete control of the business if something happened to the other one. Unfortunately, they decided that incorporating the business, starting a retirement plan, and executing a buy-sell agreement were not immediate priorities. So,
Okay, so the unexpected happened. Emmett, one of the partners, died in a car accident a week after they had met with the financial planner. So Jake, who is the surviving owner, now he has real problems. They didn't get a buy-sell agreement done. The business is still a partnership. Emmett didn't have any life insurance. Since Emmett didn't have a will, by state law, all of his assets, including his interest in the business, passed to his wife, Jenny. Jenny had been depending on his income, and so now she needs money. She doesn't even have enough to pay the funeral home. And Jake, the remaining business owner, is looking for solutions, but his advisors couldn't really help him at this point. They hadn't gotten their plan set up. So here's Jenny. She looks happy, but she's probably not too happy at this point. She needs money. Her source of income is gone. She has bills to pay. She would like Jake to be able to buy her out, but she needs full value for this business as a going concern. Before Emmett's death, they had talked, and she thought that the business was worth $400,000 as a going concern. And then here's Jake. Jake has his own problems. His business partner has just died, who was helping him with the business. He doesn't have cash. Remember, they had sunk their extra funds into buying new equipment. He needs to keep the business going for the financial security of his own family. He's lost Emmett, so now he needs to hire someone else to replace him, and he's going to have to pay that person. He wants to keep full control of the business, and he needs to keep his customers, and he also needs to keep his lines of credit with his vendors so he can keep running the body shop. So Jenny offered as an alternative that Jake could just keep paying her Emmett's salary, but as we could see, Jake needs to hire someone else, so he's not going to even have that cash to pay her. So here's the ending. If you saw the people, they would be even sadder. Although they were friends at the time of Emmett's death, the lack of cash made things get ugly fairly quickly. The funeral home was demanding payment. Jenny was falling behind with all her bills, and she needed the money. She started coming to the office every day, asking for money, which caused the business to begin to lose customers, and then some of the vendors cut off their lines of credit. So about 6 months later, they had to liquidate the business. All the newly purchased equipment had to be sold for 50 cents on the dollar. Most of the accounts receivable were lost. All the goodwill of the business was lost. And Jake and Jenny each ended up getting $75,000 rather than the $200,000 that they originally thought they would be entitled to, which would have been the value of the business as a going concern. And both families lost.
so as we see, one of the problems is if you do not take the time to put a buy-sell agreement in place, the heirs, the people who inherit the business, are really only going to have three choices. If it's a family business or even a partnership, they can try to retain the business. They can do what Jake and Emmett's wife, Jenny, had to do and liquidate the assets of the business, or they can try to find a buyer for the business. In the case of retaining the business in the family, there's some concerns as the owner that you have to ask yourself. So with the family business, are the current members in the family, are they currently active in the business? And are they capable of managing the business? I've seen this firsthand happen a couple of times with, oddly enough, I think one was a body shop and one was a towing service. The owner died unexpectedly. The family inherited a business that they didn't really want, and they had to decide what to do. So all of a sudden, the children who hadn't been really working in the business had everything dropped on their lap. Thankfully, they made it through, but they ended up selling off a lot of things along the way to keep the employees in place, and a couple of them are actually still looking to get out of the business. They don't want to get rid of the employees or close the business. So it's one of those things that without planning, and if you haven't worked with your family, are they really going to be able to carry on your legacy? So one of the biggest concerns with family, too, is keeping what we call family harmony. So in trying to equalize the inheritance, let's say you have a family and part of the children work in the business and some of the children don't. Well, how is everybody going to get an equal share? Who's going to run the business? It's also especially important if the business is part of the total net worth or the biggest part of your total net worth. How is that going to be resolved? And the ultimate theme behind all this is that we would like to keep family harmony. No one wants to see a family fall apart due to either emotional or financial struggles.
So retaining the business and the family gets even more complicated when non-family owners are involved. Just imagine in our case study, what if Jenny, instead of needing the money, had said, oh, I'm going to come in and I'm going to work in the business, and what if she and Jake didn't really get along? How will any non-family owners, Jake, feel about the family's involvement? What happens if the owners are 50-50 shareholders and one dies, leaving his interest to his wife? We saw what could happen. How will this owner feel about being 50-50 shareholders with owner one's wife? So the family concerns, as we saw in the case study, are not the same as the non-family owner's concerns. Assuming that the family members who have inherited part of the business want to get out of the business, they're going to want a top sales price for their interest. Whereas the non-family owner, who is still trying to run the business, may want to pay a lower price to be able to keep the business running. The family members are going to want prompt settlement, meaning they want their money as soon as possible, which actually goes along with what the non-family owner would want. They want to get control as soon as possible so that they can keep running the business without having to worry about interference from others. The family members can benefit by having the value of the business set for estate transfer tax purposes. And the surviving owners are going to want to keep full control, as I said. They certainly don't want part of their business to be tied up in probate and have a judge telling them how to run their business.
So usually liquidation is going to be the last resort. Nobody wants to sell off all their assets and be done. Right now, the average loss of liquidating a business ranges from 22 to 66% of the fair market value of that business. And of course, as we mentioned, in the case of Jake and Jenny, the loss of accounts receivable was also very large. So ultimately, not only financially but emotionally, no one wants to see a business end this way. It's a terrible end to what once used to be a thriving business.
So if those in the business are able to buy the interests of those who do not want to be involved in the business, that can be a great solution. It can reduce family tension. So let's say that there's a son and a daughter who do want to be involved in the business. And then there's a son who just really doesn't. He just wants to be paid off for what he's entitled to and let the others take care of the business. So what you would want to be able to happen in that instance is that there would be enough cash so that the one who doesn't want to be involved in the business can take away what he's entitled to. It also may be appropriate to sell the business to someone outside the family and just start over. So it could be sold to a key employee or a competitor.
So if you ask your question, ask the question, as some of you may be thinking, my business is small, do I really need to consider this? And the answer is absolutely yes. As you can see, any type of business, no matter your size, no matter where you're located in a community, a small community, and not a big city, it sounds like, yes, you really do need to look at a buy-sell agreement.
Okay, so what is a buy-sell agreement? It's a contract. It has a couple of important parts to it. It sets out how a sale would happen. If one thing that it does is it restricts whether or not the existing owners have to let new owners come on board. So let's say that there's someone who really wants to become an owner of the business, but the existing owners don't want them to be. The existing owners don't have to let them. But in order to not allow someone new to come have control of the business, they will need to be paid off. So a really important part of the buy-sell agreement is setting how much the business is worth and how the person is going to be paid off. So this allows orderly transition to the new owners who may be the existing owners. They just now will own more of the business. So this is about how to determine fair market value of your business. There are several ways which it can be done and which you can put in the buy-sell agreement. One might be to select an appraiser, who you'll call if an event happens, and that appraiser will set the value. There might be other ways using formulas, such as looking at book value or capitalization of earnings, and that may be the way that you set the value. Another way, sometimes the owners will agree that every year they'll have a meeting and they'll say, okay, if something happens this year, this is going to be the value of the business, so that if an unexpected event happens, there won't be any argument about how much people are entitled to be paid.
Then we come to the fun part, the funding of the business. And what might be the triggering event, as we mentioned. Is the owner ready to retire? Has someone become disabled? Has someone passed on? Is there a divorce or a personal bankruptcy in place? So funding options, funding is probably one of the most important things, because as we said, if there's no money to pay off the agreement, then the agreement really doesn't mean anything. So ways that business owners look to fund buy-sell agreements include using personal funds. Now this works great if both have significant net worth, that if something happened to one of the other partners, that there would be money there to buy out. But if you're a small business and you guys don't have that, then you might think of what we call a sinking fund, setting aside money in a separate fund just for that purpose, so that if something happens to one of the owners, that money can be used to buy the other owner out. Again, we have to hope that sufficient time has passed and enough money is accumulated to make that work. Otherwise, if something happens unexpectedly, that's not the best solution. Owners can also borrow funds. Again, in theory, that works great if you got good credit. But if you don't have sufficient credit to get enough money to buy off the person in the other end of the agreement, then that's not going to work. Installment payments are kind of a way where you make a deal with the owner that I'm going to pay you X amount per month. And over a course of time, I'm going to own the business. Now, this works great as long as the person who has taken over the business is maintaining enough sales, enough equity in the business that they can, one, continue making those payments, but two, they can also afford, and the business is growing, they don't run the business into the ground. Unfortunately, a lot of times I've seen this happen as well. The owner thinks he's going to sell a business to someone. They take over the business with high hopes. They don't know how to run the business. They end up walking away. The owner's not only sold his business, but now he has a failing business that he has to look back at. And finally comes my area of expertise, is insurance. Is a very simple, economical way to fund a buy-sell agreement. One of the nice things about life insurance is that it becomes effective the day the policy is issued. So if the owners take out a policy on each other, something happens to one of the owners, that policy would pay off the other owner. It becomes effective. Those death benefits are income tax-free. But as we said here, it's not always death. There's some other things, disability, bankruptcy, divorce. Well, we have different policies. If we have a policy, for example, that is a permanent life policy, it can build cash value, and that cash value can be taken or borrowed against to help pay off the other entity. And then overall, life insurance is probably one of the most affordable, economical ways, as I said. Oop, let me catch up to my notes here. So, we're going back to Emmett. Poor Emmett, who passed away. So had Emmett and Jake had this buy-sell agreement in place, a simple term policy on each partner, one on Jake, one on Emmett, for $200,000 would have solved would have solved the majority of the problems. Jake would have been able to pay off Jenny. She would have had the income she needed to keep her family going. He would have had sole ownership of the business. He could have kept that going, and in the end, both families win. Oop.
So in conclusion, we hope that this has educated you enough to understand what a buy-sell agreement is for, how it could be useful for your business, and we're wondering if you have any questions.
So you mentioned the formula. I tried to do some research right here about capitalized earnings and things. But how do you really? What's like the Yaleman's way of finding that price? Is it a quick formula of divide this by this, and that's how we determine it? If it's not this big, large company that we really need to go through hiring somebody and paying that expense.
Right. And an appraisal can be expensive, and I am not an accountant, although I don't know if Misty can provide any advice on this. But as you say, it may be cheaper just to make up an appropriate formula which involves book value or other figures which you can get from the accountant of the business, and that would be something that you talk about when they were trying to figure out how to set up the buy-sell agreement. Try to come up with a figure, and it may depend a lot on just what kind of business it is, what kind of income, to see what would be appropriate.
We do have another case study that we're not using life insurance for, that looks a little bit more to the valuation here, and we kind of put it at the end in case we ran out of time. This business, Jim and Larry are 50-50 shareholders. And as we see, Jim is age 62, and he's the master craftsman. Larry's 64, and he's the president. Larry's son, Frank, is the sales manager, 25 employees, and they did have the business valuated, and it came in at $4.8 million. But they have not yet set up the buy-sell agreement. So as we see here, Larry, he wants to retire within 5 years. Frank wants to buy his interest. Frank's his son, but the interest is $2.4 million, and he wants the business to continue as a success. Jim, he's not ready to retire. He wants to continue working. He loves what he does. He also thinks his daughter should be able to come in, and she's in business school. Come on, she can run the business. But if Larry retires before him, he doesn't want Larry's son to have control. He wants to have full control of the business. Again, topics that we would work on in the buy-sell agreement. Frank, he's like, well, I'm already working here. I want control of my dad's interest, but I don't have $2.4 million. What am I going to do?
So how can this be done? How will Larry transfer his shares to Frank while Jim can still be compensated? Who will assume day-to-day management of the company if Larry retires? And who will Jim transfer his shares to in the future? One of the hardest parts of the buy-sell agreement is determining the fair market value, as you mentioned. And they already had an independent appraiser determine the value. So we already know that Frank doesn't have $2.4 million. So one plan, is that the next slide? Oh, I think that's all I got. Okay. So one way to solve this problem, which didn't use life insurance since nobody was dying, and in order to accumulate cash value in the life insurance plan, it would have taken time, and they hadn't set it up yet, so life insurance was not going to work in this case. So they used a combination of the installment sale and personal gifting. So we said that Larry wanted to retire within 5 years and transfer the shares to his son. So what they did was they set up a 20-year installment sale so that Frank would owe his dad $120,000 per year plus interest. Then what does that add up to? I don't know.
Hopefully 2.4 million.
Not quite, I think, because they also had to do some gifting. Larry and his wife were going to do some annual gift tax exclusion gifts of whatever the annual exclusion is this year. Is it? 14,000, so double it to 28,000? Yeah, so they could give $28,000 worth of the company to Frank each year until it was all transferred. And in this way, Larry gets his retirement that he needs, and Frank gets to be involved in the business. Now, this plan, I don't think, took care of how the daughter was going to be involved. That'll be something for future planning.
For future, the daughter was still in college, so I think they left that for future. But just as Misty explained, every situation is going to be different. That's why one of the best things you can do is meet with your attorney, kind of hash out before you get started, what are the things that you are concerned about? Maybe you are a small business and you're not concerned about divorce and you just want a simple, like we said, term policy on each. But maybe you're thinking on a broader scale that you really want to see this business grow, you want to see family coming into it, and you want to really not have that tension when something would happen. So we would approach there is no right answer for everybody. We would take each case individually. The nice thing about if we have a disability policy in place, there are options that the owner that became disabled would get paid, and then there's an overhead cost that would allow for a time for transfer. So the idea being that it's not going to run the business for eternity, but it's going to give that remaining business owner enough cushion to be able to replace the disabled business owner, and the disabled business owner would then be living off the disability plan he had taken out in place. So that's why it's always a good idea too. Small businesses don't think about short-term, long-term disability, but that's very important as well.
So if there was also a life insurance policy with cash value, that cash value might also be able to be withdrawn and cover some expenses during disability too.
And there's a sad fact that they get insurance, they give us all these facts, but the generation in their 20s, that 1 in 4 is going to become disabled before they reach retirement. So that's a pretty high number when you think about it. Because I'm sure none of us sitting here think we're going to be disabled.
Anything else? All right. Well, thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening.